Well, welcome everyone to our North Texas podcast today. And I'm so honored to have Robert Miller joining us as my guest as we talk today about the importance of bivocational, and we even use the term co-vocational ministers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But Robert, welcome today, and I just thank you for joining us to have this discussion.
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Claunch. The honor is mine. It's been a while since we've got to sit down and do a podcast together and talk about these. And
feels good.
It does. So the honor is mine. So thanks for the invitation.
Well, I'll tell you, most of you know Robert fulfills so many different responsibilities, and we thank you for that. You're our Chief Operating Officer, working now, overseeing our loan fund and helping with our other committees, and we won't go try to name everything you do because you have been a huge blessing. But also, before you came here, you were a bivocational pastor, a banker, and a realtor. So we got 3 in 1.
That's correct. Yeah. I started out of high school. I got a job at a bank as my first job while I went to college, and I spent some time at the bank, and I enjoyed that part of learning finances. I liked money and being around money, and I found that I was great relationally with our customers that would come in the bank every day, and I found myself moving up in the bank and moving up with opportunities in the bank, and really started pursuing banking as a career choice.
Incredible preparation for what God had in store for you.
I had no idea what all God had in store. I started getting involved in our local church and serving in a lot of different capacities, and was actually sitting in a service. We had a guest speaker during a revival service, and that guest speaker called me out of the congregation in the middle of his message, and he walked down to me and he pointed at me, and he gave me now what I know is a prophetic word that I would be a great pastor one day. And so that word began to stir something in me, and at first I didn't know how that would work with what I wanted to do with my life as a banker and the career and vocation that I had chosen. But I knew God was doing something and stirring something in me, and that really began that journey of pursuing ministry, but staying in the vocational field and banking.
You know, if we were today, our theme isn't the call of God, but if it were, this would be a great story that would work there too, because, you know, God's call, we don't often know exactly everything that is packaged in that call, and for your life it unfolded and continues to unfold. And so, but today, your experience as a bivocational pastor, you and I have been talking about this for a while. We even announced last year that we wanted a special emphasis for our bivocational pastors, and actually we've been working on that. But today I just thought this would be a wonderful time because of appreciation for those people who work and minister at the same time. And I remember you saying to me that you really felt called to be a bivocational pastor.
Right.
So maybe right now you could just kind of tell us your story.
Sure, absolutely.
And then we'll talk about this.
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Claunch. This is something I am super passionate about. When I came to serve at the district now over 7 years ago, this was a conversation we had because I was leaving that field of being bivocational in that sense and coming to the district to serve what I get to do here. But it really is a preparation. It's something that God had been preparing for me and taking me down this journey and this path of discovering what it means to be bivocational. I didn't set out to say in the beginning, I'm going to be a bivocational pastor, right? I loved banking. I loved the marketplace. I loved the opportunities that gave me, but I also loved the local church, and I loved ministry, and so I struggled with that for a while of trying to discern the will of God and the direction that God was leading. And so at first, I just became the best church servant I could be. I taught Sunday school, I counted offering, I was an usher, I did all those things just to be the best church member because I had my vocation and career that I was pursuing. But God just was stirring that whole time, and then I started getting to preach a little bit, and I surrendered to the educational piece of saying, okay, I need to be educated to be a pastor, and I started through School of Ministry and pursuing my credentials that way, and so it just really unfolded over time of the opportunities, and I first became an executive pastor at a church and did that for 2.5 years while I was in banking and finance, and learning both sides of how to be a bivocational minister from a church standpoint and the demands and requirements environments, but also in working in a large financial institution. And then I got my first opportunity to become a lead pastor.
Okay,
and
wonderful.
I really got to truly see what it means to be a bivocational pastor in the sense of pastoring a smaller church where I wore a lot of the hats in the church at that time and carried a lot of those responsibilities, but also had demands from the marketplace and from the workplace. And I really found so many positives from that. There were challenges, and I can share some of those challenges here in a little bit, but there were so many positives that got to happen because I wouldn't just preach a message to our congregation. I was living it out.
Right.
The demands of working in an environment with not all believers and having time frames and having a boss that was really hard on you and all those dynamics that my church members were dealing with on a weekly basis. I could relate to those things with them. And so I got to pastor in that context. I was a lead pastor for almost 9 years in the church we were at, and bivocational and banking and finance that entire time. And there were seasons where we would pray and say, okay, God, am I supposed to be done vocationally and just focus on the church and just pastor full time? And we just never felt that release. And there were some reasons that I can share a little bit more today on the choice. As you said, I felt called. God ended up confirming that call, that we felt it was by choice to stay bivocational, that God had prepared us for that. And I ended up getting another prophetic word early on in ministry that God had given me a dual anointing for business and ministry, and that God would help me with that, basically, to walk that out. And so that became our journey of staying bivocational by choice. And now looking back, it was God preparing us for the season that North Texas, when they came and called me to come here and serve as the loan fund director, I was the needle in a haystack, as the word was used.
That's what we called that.
To be banking and ministry at the same time. And so I now know, and God confirmed, that there was a purpose behind me by being bivocational during those years.
You know, you said two things that were important to me, and I think, first of all, when you talk about being bivocational, but also you're really in the harvest field when you're working as maybe as you did, a realtor, a banker, and sometimes I think we can see that it's and there are challenges we'll talk about, but if you can have that perspective, that you're really living out what you're preaching.
Absolutely.
To do that. And then a second thing I want to just touch on for a moment. We hear a lot about prophetic words, and I think all of us know that sometimes it's somebody's desire to bless you, but when you really have a true prophetic word, that's life changing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And kind of how did that was that confirmed in you?
Sure.
That this was more than just somebody's good wish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with the prophetic ministry, I didn't get saved till I was 18, and so that first prophetic word that I mentioned in a revival service was really my first year of being saved.
Interesting.
And our church had a 27-week revival, and so talking about, I think it was for me. God knew how much I needed to come from and grow, and so it was in that revival that we had a very trusted minister come and share during most of those, and so I think the first part of receiving the prophetic word was it was from a trusted source. It was a genuine ministry that you just knew. You saw the fruit from that. And I think the other piece of it that nobody else can confirm except for me was we used an old term. It bore witness with me. Right?
Absolutely,
and that's
I
a
love
term
that
we
term.
use. Yeah, and so I think there was something in me that when I got that word, it didn't scare me. I didn't immediately dismiss it, because there was already something inside.
Already something there.
That the Holy Spirit had stirred.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it connected with that word. And I was like, that's what God is doing. I didn't know what it was until that word brought that out or confirmed that stirring I had inside me.
I think the Lord's kind of leading us down this particular course just a minute, because we don't just go out on somebody's word, but I think what you said, that inner confirmation, it bears witness to something that already the Lord is starting in you. And there may be somebody of you listening today that you've had something said over your life, and you're trying to discern, is it the Lord or not? But if there's already been something inside of you that's confirmed, that word confirms it, then it gives it more credibility.
Absolutely.
I've heard, one man said, asked one man why he was in the ministry, and told me about his aunt having called him into the ministry. That's not what we're talking about. Anyway, so it's wonderful that God gave you a supernatural, 2 different times, prophetic word that was used from. But back to the bivocational, the opportunities and the challenges. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, you mentioned a moment ago that the opportunities that were given from being bivocational. And in the community I was in, I was a business owner in the community and a pastor. And it was the business ownership that got me more platforms of influence than it was pastoring. Yeah. I was the president of our Chamber of Commerce. I was on the soccer board for our soccer club. I coached soccer. I coached all the sports that my kids played at that time. And so it was those opportunities because of my business influence that got me in those doors, that then they knew, oh, you're also the pastor in town. And so I did weddings and funerals and counseled people and had gifts given to the church for ministry that we were doing because of the doors that the vocational opened up for the ministry side. And so there were so many positives of that you get to be where people are, and you don't wait for them to come to the church.
Oh, that's excellent.
On a Sunday morning, I went where they were and throughout the week and was really sensitive to those opportunities.
So what did you do in your free time?
Not much free time. I have an amazing wife who has been on this journey with us, 4 amazing children in that season of being bivocational, and that was one of the areas where we were very adamant and strategic to do our best not to create sacrifices where they sacrificed mom and dad during that season. So that's why I coached all my kids' sports. I never missed a game. We included our kids in ministry at the church, so there wasn't dad's at work doing church stuff. They were a part of that journey with us. And I truly felt that the call of ministry wasn't just an individual call, it was a family call. And now that our children are older, our oldest is now married and serving in ministry, and so I'm so grateful for that.
Do you have any grandchildren?
I do. We have one grandson now.
Well, I thought maybe you'd want to mention that before.
I'm very proud of him, and he's a lot of fun.
You're talking about the importance of family, and I know when we talk to missionaries who are going, we say, this call is your family call.
It is. And
children that often raised on the mission field, sometimes there are challenges, but often they become missionaries too.
Absolutely.
So your attention to your family, it was really important. And
I will tell you, that's one of the frustrations when I hear people make jokes about PKs, that wander from the church or wander from their relationship with God. And I carry that as a frustration because it doesn't have to be that way. And I don't like that we joke about that, because being a PK, a pastor's kid, a missionary's kid, it is difficult.
Sure.
There's extra scrutiny. There's eyes on you all the time.
That's true.
You walk out things differently. But we felt as pastors that we wanted to do our very best to raise our children, that was our first ministry, and that we wanted them to love the church, that they didn't see it as a job, that was Dad's job, that's what Dad did, that was our calling. And so we brought them enough into it. Obviously, we had to shield them from certain things in the church, but we wanted them to walk out that journey so they would grow up and learn to love the church and not hate the church because of what it did to mom and dad.
Robert, you're touching on something about bivocational ministry. Anybody, this fits
absolutely
anybody right now. But the need to balance is in bivocational ministry. Of course, not only ministry and family, but you also have a ministry church assignment. And can we just throw the term co-vocational in here for a minute?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because we use both of these terms, and we'll kind of maybe define it for a minute, then get back to this balance, which is a challenge.
You see there's some different terms being used now. There are some authors and some speakers who have started trying to highlight the positives of bivocational ministry or co-vocational ministry. I will tell you a little background on that. I remember being in one of my first gatherings with my peers. It was probably a sectional or church pastor gathering, and I remember being in that meeting, and there's a question that I don't like it when it gets asked, but we always do it. How big is your church?
Oh, yeah.
And for some reason, that's like a badge of something that we ask each other in the ministry.
One of the first questions.
It's one of the first questions. And I remember answering that question, and then one of the next questions was finding out that I was bivocational. And I still remember the look that I got and the feeling I had in that moment that I was suddenly less than.
Oh, man.
Because I was not quote unquote full-time in ministry, and that for some reason I wasn't as qualified or as good of a leader. And that was something that was probably so minuscule or small in the moment, but I carried that
But
so
for you,
big.
it wasn't small.
Oh, and so it became
Yeah.
a battle for me for a while of knowing I knew I was supposed to be bivocational, but not feeling like I was good enough in the pastoral side of the calling. And so now I think that's one of the reasons why some are trying to highlight this bivocational and co-vocational movement to really bring out the positives, that it's not a negative. It's not something that's looked down upon, that we can truly have tent makers that are ministers still.
Absolutely,
You know?
yeah.
And if you look back in the Bible, there's so many instances of the people that Jesus chose to be his closest apostles and disciples came from vocational ministries. And so that term bivocational, some are moving from that because the initial bi leans towards a division, like it's either or, that you can't do both and that you're divided, where the entry for co-vocational means that you're doing both together,
Yeah.
that there's not a division there. And so that's some of that language that you're hearing now. Others differentiate the two of saying you're bivocational because you have to be. Either there's a financial need for your family or the
Exactly.
church size or church budget, but as soon as you're able to, you'll be only in pastoral ministry and not bivocational, whereas co-vocational means I'm choosing to serve in two capacities or work in two fields, ministry and marketplace. So those are some of the differences you're hearing when you hear those words used now.
Well, you said something, too, I want to emphasize to everybody that's listening today, and that is that in no way, as a matter of fact, we honor those who are in bivocational or co-vocational ministry.
My heroes.
And probably a fourth of our district, maybe a little more, are fulfilling that kind of a capacity. Many are in rural situations, but not all. And I just think it's important for you to hear from us and from our district that we don't look at a bivocational pastor as less than a full-time. You are actually in an amazing opportunity to fulfill both roles.
Absolutely.
And so we've been wanting to come out to you and say, you matter to us. You are fulfilling sometimes a challenging and difficult role, and yet if you weren't where you are, I'm speaking to our friends today, we'd have communities that would have no witness.
No ministry, yeah.
And certainly not a Pentecostal witness, but maybe even a witness of Jesus Christ.
Well, and our listeners today, and you would agree with this, I think one of the challenges or the thoughts that I had to overcome was there was no such thing as part-time ministry.
Yeah.
So although I was divided in my time, ministry was very much full-time and the marketplace was very much full-time. And so I think that's an encouragement for a pastor today, is just because you're splitting your time between multiple or two commitments, there's no such thing as part-time ministry. You're giving it your best and you're doing what God has called you to do.
So say that again. There's no such
thing as part-time ministry. That's not what God called us to do.
Maybe you've never heard it put that way before, but I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
And really, isn't that the case for every Christian?
Absolutely.
That we may have a job, but our first job is to present Jesus Christ. And so,
and I think that's
not
a
so
question.
different than a
It's not.
bivocational.
I think that's a question for everybody that serves in any kind of ministry capacity to answer, is if you weren't paid to do what you're doing today, would you still do what you're doing?
Yeah.
And I think the call on our lives to share the gospel, to spread the good news, to love people, to bring
Exactly.
people hope, it doesn't matter what the paycheck is. We're all called to do that in some measure or capacity.
So for our bivocational pastors or co-vocational, we may say either term.
Sure.
But what are some of the challenges that they face? Because it's not always an easy assignment.
No, it's not. There were challenges personally and professionally. So from a personal standpoint, it's juggling that family time and those commitments of being a husband and a father, and the demands on a family, and really guarding and protecting. One of the things that we did for our church is we were vocal about that, and we told our church, look, I work another job. I'm a father and a husband first, and so I'm not going to be able to be at every single thing you need. The church needs to be the church, and if there's a prayer need, I don't always have to be the first call. We can call each other in the church.
That's
we
good.
can be there for each other. But then we were also just strategic with the church calendar. We didn't schedule every single thing 3 and 4 and 5 nights a week, because I led the way of protecting that time with my family, and we protected that for our church body. So we didn't overdo the church calendar. We guarded our family time. We protected those moments. We did our best to be intentional about time away and vacations and those opportunities with our kids. From a professional standpoint, being bivocational, I think some of the hardest things were missing opportunities for fellowship with other ministers, educational growth opportunities, sectional gatherings, those type of things I had to use vacation time for, or I just couldn't make some of those things. And so feeling detached a little bit was one of those feelings you wrestle with, and I love how we're trying to find solutions to that as a district, to be strategic in that flexibility with people's schedules and with gatherings and creating those moments, because you do feel on an island sometimes because you can't be at everything that's offered.
So people can really feel isolated.
Yeah.
Isolated from the fellowship. And, that can develop into feeling, I may use the word estranged. Mm-hmm. It's not that's anybody's intention, but isolation is a real struggle, not only for bivocational ministers, it's for all of us. We have to be intentional about connecting,
right.
I think, But let me back up just for a moment. You said something real important. I don't want to forget where we are here, but you said something real important, and that is that you talk to your church mm-hmm. about your role, mm-hmm. and in doing so, you were helping them to understand how they needed to, we might say, step up and be a part of the ministry of the church to help right. fulfill what you weren't able to. I think that's really huge.
It was setting expectations for the church to know that, I wasn't going to be able to answer every phone call right away. I wasn't going to make every visit right away. I wasn't going to attend every game or event or everything that I got invited to. We had to be strategic about that, but we set the culture as such where our church almost became protective of that as well, and understood that, and it wasn't. We didn't battle that too much, once the culture was set and the understanding was, and we ended up building a great staff at our church. At one time at our church, we had 10 credentialed ministers on staff at our church, all bivocational.
Wow,
all working in the marketplace and leading a church, and we got a lot done, and we accomplished a lot, but we had set that culture to where everybody felt okay to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think it'd be important for us to train our leadership, our sectional, regional, district leadership. And I'm not just talking about people in office. I'm talking about people who are fellow pastors, mm-hmm. That maybe don't realize some of the challenges that their bivocational peers are having, and to intentionally reach out and make a call and say, how are you doing? Because they right. can't always show up at meetings,
right,
where most of the fellowship takes place.
Yeah, I think extending that hand, that isolation feeling is real. It's legitimate for pastors who don't get to be a part of the things that we do, the gatherings that we have, and being intentional about building those relationships in a way that fits their schedules is so important, and it means a lot. I can tell you that from my own personal experience, and those relationships. I ended up having 2 very close friends in ministry that we were all in the same seasons of life, doing life together, and I was bivocational and they weren't, and they went out of their way and to make time around my time when that fit, and those 2 guys were invaluable to my years of pastoring there, and we just did life and learned and grew so much together.
Yeah. So, Robert, out of your experience, what would you say to a young minister who's maybe just getting started and maybe have an opportunity to become it doesn't have to be a lead pastor, it could be a youth pastor or a children's pastor that requires a job,
sure,
because they can't be paid full time. But maybe as we look at this, what would you say to them to position them with a healthy approach to understanding their assignment and the uniqueness of it?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I'll tackle that from a couple of angles. First of all, you truly need to surrender to a call. And if God has called you to something, then He is the provider, and He'll provide. And sometimes He provides that through the context of the ministry taking care of you and your family, and sometimes He provides it in giving you another gift or a skill set that you can use in a way that provides for you and your family. And if it's a call, it's a matter of just trusting the Lord that He's going to, whichever direction He gives for you to take care of you, that he's going to do that in that measure. I think the second thing is just looking at the reality of culture today. First of all, giving trends. We're seeing giving trends decline in churches today. That's a reality. So giving is changing. The way people give, the timing that people give is changing. So church budgets are a little different. The second thing is, we're in Texas. It's not getting any cheaper to live in Texas.
Yeah, it's true.
Cost of living is increasing. Just the cost to live life is increasing. And so sometimes you have to make the choice that what level of comfort are you okay with, living in your life. And then we're just seeing an increasing gap in opportunities. So you have your much larger churches that can have the budget to have many staff members and many layers of staff. And then we have some incredible churches in communities where you could truly pastor a community. And the opportunity is great for somebody that would surrender to that call. But going to that community, you're going to have to build your team around volunteer help. You're going to have to build it on people in the community and people in the church. But there are some incredible opportunities in our smaller communities and cities across North Texas. And so I would just encourage them to explore their options, to be open to something new, to change their mindset of it having to look a certain way, of ministry looking a certain way. Because for me, that was it. I thought, I would go into a large church, a big church, I'd get to pastor 1,000 people, and that wasn't the case for me. God took me on a different path and had a different level of influence and impact for me. And he did that through being bivocational for that season. And so just kind of opening up and expanding your thoughts and ideas of what the opportunities are, because there are some great opportunities to pastor out there.
I appreciate what you said, and this is something we say to all of our pastors. We're not called to pastor just a church.
Right.
We're called to pastor a city, a community. And let me add to that's not always just us, but sometimes we get drawn into a wonderful fellowship. And I found in our city when we were pastoring that it wasn't just Assembly of God.
Right.
We had a prayer group of 15 or more pastors and prayed with our mayor.
Right.
And we all prayed for different areas of the city. And so we were all pastoring the city. And so I appreciate the fact you said you were involved in the business side as a pastor.
Right.
And you brought credibility into those meetings as a pastor.
It was great. Our church ended up hosting, HOA meetings for the neighborhoods around us. We were blessed with almost 20 acres of property, so we had football teams and soccer teams practicing on our property. We had a theater club that used our church for theater practice, and it was all those opportunities because of my engagement in the community roles that I got to serve in that opened up opportunities for our church to meet people where they were in their influence of life.
Well, there's so many opportunities, and maybe we'll do another podcast on maybe looking at those opportunities. But I just am so appreciative of your story and how that has brought you here, where you cover so many bases that God doesn't waste our time.
That's right.
And there are things we sometimes gain an experience in that may not be the main thing, but it's certainly a part of the main thing, and whatever.
Absolutely.
Robert, I wonder if you could maybe just look to our friends that are joining us on this podcast and maybe pray over some that are either struggling and trying to balance with family. There are financial challenges. We didn't talk about that a lot. But when God calls us and we know that he put us there, then we can know that he's promised his help.
That's right.
So maybe just pray and say any words of encouragement, because let me just say this from my superintendent, tell you, we value you, we love you, and we want you to know that we're trying to find ways to be more and more intentional about inclusion, connection, and just being known to be a part of the vital family of North Texas. You are a part of that vital family.
Amen.
So,
I'll just kind of encourage two groups of people, and then I'd love to pray. Thank you for that opportunity. I think the first group I'd like to encourage is those that are bivocational right now. Maybe you're serving in your church and you're working a job or serving in the marketplace and it's difficult, it's hard. You're asking why. I asked that question a lot in the early days. Why, God, am I doing both? Why is my church budget not big enough to take care of us? And I asked that question a lot. And let me just encourage you this. Everything's for a season. And you don't know what God's doing in this season to prepare you for the next season. I'm living proof and a testimony of God preparing me in a season for a new season that I never fathomed or imagined. And so make the most of the season you're in. Learn the most you can. Lean into God as much as you can to hear from God of what he wants to do through you in this season. And then focus on the positives. Don't lean in and think about the negatives and the challenges, because they're there, they're real, and you're living those out. But focus on the positives of why you're bivocational and why you are doing that. And look at the wins that God is doing and the opportunities he's given you. The next group I think I'll encourage is those that are, maybe you're an engineer, you're a school teacher, you're a businessman, you're a finance person like me, and you're out there, but you feel a tug in your heart, and you it's a call. It's a call to ministry that God's stirring in you, but you're going, I'm educated for this, and I've worked a long time in this, and I have these commitments in my field I'm in. Let me just encourage you to pray in that way, that
Yes.
it's not either or. God can still use you as an engineer or a teacher or a businessman and use you in ministry. And maybe you've been trying to figure out how you got to give up one to do the other. And let me just say, you don't have to. It can be and then, not either or. So let me pray for those today. God, thank you for this opportunity to encourage our ministers today. Thank you for Dr. Claunch's heart and passion for this need. God, it's increasing, and as was mentioned, the number of ministers that we have that are serving bivo or co-vocationally is increasing. The demands of pastors in ministry are growing every day, and the challenges that come with this. So God, I pray that you give us wisdom and discernment of how to help meet these needs and resource our bivocational pastors and to meet them where they are and to connect with those that are feeling isolated. God, I pray right now that you would just surround and encourage, God, with a fresh passion, a fresh renewal of their calling, those that are in bivocational and walking out maybe a frustrating season, God, that you would renew and give them that sense of urgency. Remind them when they first surrendered to the call and they said yes, God, that you're with them in this season, God, that you're walking them through this, and that you're not wasting this time. I love that you're not wasting anything. You're not wasting this season. And God, for those that out there that are struggling with the call and how that would look, and where are they going to go and how can they do it, God, I thank you that you're a God of detail, and that you can bring every detail together in a perfect way that's clear, and it brings a peace that as we walk through those opportunities, God, we'll know that you're with us. And God, I believe we have some great pastors out there that haven't surrendered to that yet, but they're going to, because they've heard this and they're encouraged by these opportunities, that it is possible, that it can be done. And so we thank you for that today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Robert, you have blessed me today, and I've blessed many of our friends I know. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
The insights that you have. We want our ministers to know that this is a priority.
Yeah.
I think for the call of God, for you to serve in the capacities perhaps as bio or co-vocational. So thank you for joining us for this podcast. We look forward to seeing you for the next one. So may God richly bless you. Thank you again, Robert.
Thanks, Dr. Claunch.